Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins, a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and sacred scriptures, along with information on topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Korda. Wineskins is brought to you by the Annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview Permanent Deacon Jesse McClain. We will also look at the life of St. Francis of Rome, as well as reflections on the readings for this Third Sunday of Lent. That and more coming up on Wineskins. In our current issue, I will speak with Sister Jean Orsuto from the Emmanuel Community Care Center. With me is Sister Jean Orsuto, who is the director of Emmanuel Community Care Center in Girard. Sister, welcome back to Wineskins.
Thank you.
You know, last time you were here right before the Christmas holidays, we talked about the wonderful work that the Community Care Center has been doing over these many years. Now, as you prepare for Easter, and I know you have a virtual fundraiser that's happening, tell us a little bit about what you'd like to achieve with that.
This has been a very challenging time, of course, for all of us. Last year, we were unable to have our fundraiser because we usually had one in person. You know, that was a very lovely gathering with a lot of energetic people that were very supportive of the Emmanuel Community Care Center. So this year, we are planning in April to have a virtual fundraiser. We're still working on finalizing the exact date, but we will be having a virtual fundraiser, which will be done 99% online, because that's the way we have to go right now with the current situation. We use the money that we raise in the fundraiser to assist people in our community. We use it to support the residents that live at the Emmanuel Community Care Center. We use it to help people with food and, help at holiday times. We'll be doing Easter baskets again this year. We do them for children ages 2 to 12 years of age, and we'll be doing the Easter baskets again this year. It always adds a nice little touch, and the interesting thing about the Easter baskets is that it's a tradition that we carried on from St. Rose. They did that when they first started, and when we turned everything over to the Emmanuel Center, they continued to support the Easter effort to make sure that children had what they needed for Easter. I always say, when we're filling the baskets, the Easter Bunny does not skimp on candy, so make sure these kids have the candy they need for Easter. So
that's a wonderful thing about the Community Care Center is it's a community celebration. It's a community ministry. And over the years, that community has kind of grown to include like Liberty and Mineral Ridge and McDonald. And so that whole community being brought together, not only those that you have served, but those who help you in that service ministry. How have you engaged people to volunteer to really take on the mission of the care center?
So, we've been very blessed. The churches, especially those in Girard, have been very, very supportive of us. For any holiday that we have, we can count on the churches supporting us. Also, people in the community that know the Emmanuel Center, businesses in the community, we can always count on them at holiday times to give us support, and they also help us. Many, many places help us with our fundraiser in terms of sponsorships and advertisements and all kinds of things that's, auction items that support what we do. And we're so grateful for that, because we could never do what we do without the strong support that we get from people, individuals, businesses, churches. We could never do what we do without that support.
You've been there since 2003. Tell us what has been the greatest joy for you in these many years.
I think that when I came to the Emmanuel Center, all I knew was I wanted to help those who were poor. Sister Lucille was retiring, and they needed somebody to take her place, and I was ready for a change, and I came to the Emmanuel Center. I think over the years, I look at the number of lives that we have touched. Some of the people that have lived at the Emmanuel Center, they've gone on to be paramedics, social workers, independent workers, and those are success stories. Some of the children that were babies are are now graduating from high school, and they're excelling. I mean, the children are just excelling, and to see that happen over the years is truly rewarding. And also, we can't tell you how many times people come into the center and just say, we are so grateful you're here. We don't know what we would do if you weren't here. The little bit of food that we give, or the help at the holidays, or, even giving the kids an Easter basket, or when the school supplies come out, or help at Thanksgiving and Christmas. It means a lot to people in the community. And I think that just to know that we can touch so many lives, it's a great joy. It's a great blessing. I've been blessed for the years I've been able to do this, and I really am grateful for the opportunity to have continued to serve people.
And Sister, give us the website of the Care Center.
It's actually hmhousing.org.
And they can go to that if they would like to make a contribution or learn how to contribute to the Emmanuel Community Care Center.
Yes, they can, yes.
Sister Jane Orsuto, thank you for your many years of service and ministry to the people in Girard and the greater community. And thank you for what you've done, especially in the midst of this pandemic.
Thank you.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. This coming Tuesday, the Church celebrates the feast of St. Francis of Rome. To tell us more is Vince Pecchia. He is from St. Angela Merici Church in Youngstown.
Francesca Busso was born in Rome in 1384. At the age of 13, Francesca married and had 3 children. Since her family was well off financially, she was able to perform many works of charity, especially during the time of national famine and plague. Her husband, Lorenzo, was a commander in the pontifical troops, who eventually was wounded in battle. Francesca courageously endured the subsequent disability of her husband and the loss of 2 of her children to the plague. Following the death of her husband in 1436, after 40 years of marriage, she entered the religious congregation she helped to found, and she eventually became superior. She died while reciting the office of the Blessed Virgin Mary on March 9th, 1440. After her canonization in 1608, the Church of Santa Maria Nuova was named St. Francis of Rome. Her canonization states that by her prayers and sufferings, she helped bring the Western Schism, as well as the revenants of the popes of Avignon, France, to an end. The opening prayer of her memorial Mass describes Francis of Rome as a unique example of life and marriage, as well as in religious life. In a city plagued with moral decadence, the example of this wife and mother aroused admiration in many. What should be noted, especially in the life of St. Francis of Rome, is a harmonious fusion of married life with a lofty mysticism. At a time when daily communion was not permitted, and especially not for married persons, a priest once marveled that she was receiving communion several times a week. Her life as an oblate was simply synonymous with the virtues that characterized her married life. It is especially as a wife and mother who practice heroic virtue that she is a model and example for all married persons. For Wineskins, I'm Vince Pecchia.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Korda. Today we're going to talk to Deacon Jesse McClain. Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you, Father.
You know, it's kind of interesting. Our topic today is going to be Jewish-Christian dialogue or studies, and it's going to be kind of strange for 2 Roman Catholics to talk about Jewish studies, but I think it's important for us as Catholics and as Christians to remember and to lift up our common respect and knowledge and the monotheistic faith that we share. So let's tell the folks that are with us how you got interested in Jewish Christian studies and what drew you to that.
Everybody always asks that, especially survivors. Survivors are very suspicious when anybody's interested in the Holocaust, justifiably so. And I never have a really good answer other than it always amazes me. It's something in us as humans. I have no idea where we want to be better than the next person. If you have an acre, someone has 5 acres. If you drive a Lexus, someone else drives a Mercedes. There's something in human nature that drives this, injustice. It was always difficult to present that when I taught in the public schools because the students all assumed I was Jewish because I taught it. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. If someone teaches about World War II, does that mean they were in World War II or the Civil War? Mm-hmm. I said, it's just an area of interest. Mm-hmm. And the more I became knowledgeable of it, and I remember being a teenager myself, getting books on it. And at the time, it was like very subdued. The books were, hidden away on a special shelf. No one talked about the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. The interest grew. And the curiosity. It was the curiosity. And then I got to the point where it was like, well, that's our mother religion. Right. We should know about the Old Testament. We should know about, the 5 books. And it just grew from there, Father.
Let's talk about how important Judaism is in the life of faith. If it wasn't for the Jewish people, the land of Israel, we wouldn't have the beginnings and the Old Testament of the Bible. Why is it important for us, at least as Christians, to find that as a foundation for us?
I think it's important because, our first reading at Mass is always from the Old Testament, and you really should understand what you're reading. Sometimes we go through rote, reading instead of understanding what's the message that's being imparted to us, because really that's the thing about the Torah for Jews. It's always a message, and I think that's one thing I always admired about the religion. It was always, their basic tenet was, how can I improve life for everybody around me? How can I be a better Jew? How can I, make life better for everybody else? And I think as Christians, we should keep that in mind constantly. Our Savior would want us to, make everybody around us, their life a lot better.
Let's go back to, you mentioned the Holocaust initially. Let's kind of lift that up and talk about that. For many people, it's something that is part of history. For some people, unfortunately, it's something that never happened. Why is it important for us as a humanity to remember and to celebrate why we had the Holocaust and why we can't have that ever again?
Well, I always told my students, and I still tell audiences when I go speak to groups, I'm employed at the Jewish Community Center as their educator, and through that I go to different groups to speak at no charge, and I always tell them that, there are basic warning signs, and it wasn't the first genocide. I always tell students you had the Armenian, and then after the Holocaust of World War II, Bosnia, Serbia, Cambodia. There's one going on today. Darfur you had. Rwanda. I said, it's current. We haven't learned anything from the past. Everybody always says it's important to know history because then you learn from it. But as human beings, we must be very slow learners because we have not learned over generations.
It's interesting because you mentioned history. There's that saying that history repeats itself. And if we don't respect history, we see it repeating time and again. What is in human nature that's making us do something like that?
I honestly, deep down, believe that there's something innate in us as human beings where we like to feel better than the person next to us. I don't understand that either, but as a human being, we always like to feel superior. Like I said earlier, you have a half acre, I have an acre. You have a Volkswagen, I have a Mercedes. I mean, there's something in us. As Christians, with the Holocaust, I personally believe it goes back to the blood libel. I can remember in the 70s sitting in local churches, it was supposed to be taken out and it wasn't, where the priest said, "Who killed Christ?" 3 words. And the entire congregation in the church responded 2 words, "The Jews." And I remember looking at my wife and it was like, and she said, "Don't get upset, don't make a scene, And I said, it's no wonder why we have problems that is still going on, because with Nostra Aetate, that was, the Passion was supposed to be cleaned up and sanitized. And I think Pope John Paul reiterated that by going to the Roman synagogue, These are our brothers.
For more information and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doi.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Every one of us knows that there are two ways to clean a house. One is routine and regular, the other is radical and seldom. In the first, you do the normal everyday housework, but in the second, you move the furniture, clean out the refrigerator, closets, and drawers, and get your house extra clean. The latter way of doing housework is called spring cleaning. When winter is over, we open up the windows and doors and let in the fresh air and get our house extra clean. As we hear the gospel for this third Sunday of Lent, we see Jesus doing this exact same thing to the house of God, the temple. During Passover, the house of God was turned into a marketplace. Merchants and money changers filled every nook and cranny. Doubtless, Jesus had witnessed this before, but for some reason, he couldn't tolerate it any longer. So with a whip in his hand, he began to clean house. The temple needed that kind of cleaning that day, and sometimes so do our lives. At what better time to do it than the season of Lent? Our lives need a spiritual cleaning in the same way that our homes need a spring cleaning. With the passing of time, excess junk and plain dirt tends to accumulate in our lives. Our lives get cluttered over time with unnecessary things. Sometimes things that we never planned or deliberately pursued. I wonder how many of us are leading overcrowded lives. Decay and disintegration are an inherent part of this present world. Truths that are never renewed eventually become falsehoods. Virtues left unexamined become vices. Ideas and ways of doing things can grow old and outmoded and need to be changed. The point is that we never get through sweeping out and throwing away. Junk accumulates and good things go bad. As we stand at the foot of the cross, may we understand that every life needs a good, periodic spring and spiritual cleaning.
Blessed James Alberione, the founder of the Society of St. Paul, tells us that our spirituality is essentially Eucharistic. The Eucharist is intimacy with Jesus. It is profound communion with the Master in the mystery of his death and resurrection. It is the experience of salvation, the starting point of a day to be spent in building the kingdom of God. In the Eucharist, our entire being undergoes a transformation that day after day strengthens in us faith, selflessness, transcendence, and a more supernatural spirit. The Eucharist reveals our wounds and heals them. It exposes our pride and self-sufficiency and helps us to become humble and docile. It breaks down our self-defenses and makes us capable of gratitude and generous, joyous self-offering. The Eucharist gives meaning to our earthly pilgrimage by pointing out to us our goal each day, communion with the Trinity and fullness of life in God.
By the time we can walk, each of us yearns for the joy that comes from being able to do for ourselves. Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy. Church World Service.
The song we have for you today is from the CD called What Wondrous Love. It is Songs for Lenten Journey.
Tried by sinful men.
And to tell us about the scriptures for this third Sunday of Lent is Sister Mary McCormick. She is the General Superior of the Ursuline Sisters of Youngstown.
When I was a student in college, I took a series of courses on the history of art and music in the Western world. One of the great themes of that course was that art and music, and every form of literature, has theme and variation. During the season of Lent, the readings of the Church provide that same pattern. The great theme of Lent is the Paschal Mystery, the journey with Jesus to Calvary. Each year in Lent, the theme begins with the temptations in the desert on the first Sunday and continues with the Transfiguration on the second Sunday. Lent comes to an end with Palm Sunday and Holy Week. We find constant themes there as well. The Passion of Christ is proclaimed on Palm Sunday, and the events of Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday sound the familiar theme of the last days of the life of Jesus. But on the third, fourth, and fifth Sundays of Lent, we have a little variation. Of course, the great themes of the life of Jesus echo forth: God's love and plan for salvation that is always with us, the lack of faith of God's people, the promise of salvation renewed, and the surprising ways in which that promise will be fulfilled. This Sunday, the third Sunday of Lent, we begin with that variation. I want to focus on Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, today's second reading. Paul reminds us that we preach Christ crucified. At first, this sounds like a familiar theme in Christianity, and it is for us. But for Paul, who is trying to figure out what had happened in the death of Christ, it was not yet a familiar theme. In fact, Paul reminds us that death by way of crucifixion was a stumbling block for most who heard that message. The death of Jesus on the cross is like a parable. Parable is more than just a story that Jesus told. It is a literary form that subverts the typical worldview. Think of the Good Samaritan. We hear that story as a story of a virtuous man. But a first-century Palestinian Jew would have said, "There is no such creature as a good Samaritan." The story told by Jesus turned their ordinary worldview upside down. When we hear Paul's reminder that we preach Christ crucified, we have to think about the experiences of suffering that are stumbling blocks for us. Maybe a marriage that ended in divorce, a person who died too young, someone we love who was arrested for embezzlement or human trafficking, or being let go from a job that we loved and provided well for our family. Can we imagine that the suffering that comes with those experiences can be an entree into the redemptive suffering of Christ? Can we imagine that there will be happiness and joy in life after these events? The hope of Easter moves us to endure the suffering, its pain and its heartache, until the day when we can experience the joy of the resurrection. For Wineskins, I am Sister Mary McCormick.
The entrance exam to Jesus' School of Discipleship has only one question. Do you really mean business? If your answer is yes, He will open His whole heart to you, accept you gladly, and work with you forever. Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Korda, saying thank you for being with us. Have a blessed week.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
They say America is the land of opportunity, but for some, life isn't so easy. Right now in America, 1 in 6 children lives below the poverty line. That's nearly 13 million children of all races, all across our country. Where do you draw the line and get involved? You can make a difference in more ways than you think. Go to povertyusa.org today, because 1 in 6 children in poverty is one too many. A message from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.